The Quiet Ledger. Part 1. The Other Scoreboard. Everyone in that warehouse break room is chasing the same math. Pick up another double and the number on Friday gets a little bigger. That's the whole game, or so it seems. You've taken 3 doubles this month already, hauling pallets until your knees ache, still clocking in at $21 an hour, same as always. Nobody in that break room talks about the other scoreboard. The one that isn't asking for your Saturdays. It's just sitting quietly in an app on your phone, working while you sleep, worth more right now than the shift you just finished. By 9:15 the next morning, you're back at the shipping desk, and Marcus from inventory leans over to show you photos of his new truck. A loaded pickup, financed for 6 years, $612 a month. Figured I earned it, he says, and you understand exactly what that sentence is supposed to buy him and exactly what it actually costs. You and Marcus make almost the same money. Same shifts, same vending machine coffee, same 2.5% raise every spring. Yet somehow, a truck in the parking lot makes it look like he's winning. For a moment, it does feel that way. Then you're back at your station and you open your banking app again, except this time you scroll past checking. Savings, $410. A 401k you started when you got hired, $1,850 with a 3% employer match. Nothing else. No brokerage account, no Roth, nothing. You add it up twice and land just under $2,300. That number behaves differently than a paycheck. A paycheck passes through you. It lands, it leaves, it becomes rent and groceries and gas. This number is what's left standing after everything else already took its cut. This is what you actually own. You think about Marcus's truck differently now. It loses value every mile he drives it. Your 401k contribution, $140 a month, automatic and boring, is the only bill you pay that makes you wealthier instead of poorer for paying it. Nobody shows off a retirement statement at the lunch table, but one of these numbers compounds and the other depreciates the moment it rolls off the lot. The contribution limit for the year is far above anything you're putting in. You're not maxing anything out, you're barely in the game. But for the first time, just being in the game feels like the whole point, and the truck payment starts looking like a costume instead of a milestone. Driving your 10-year-old sedan home that night, the one with the cracked windshield you've been meaning to fix, you don't feel behind anymore. You feel like you finally understand what's actually being measured. It was never the vehicle in the lot. It was never the number that hits your account and vanishes by the 12th. It's the number that stays. And right now, most of what stays isn't growing. Something else is quietly eating it alive. You pull into your apartment complex and sit in the car for a minute before going in, engine ticking as it cools. You think about how many conversations at work orbit the same handful of purchases, trucks, phones, weekend trips, and how rarely anyone mentions the quiet number sitting behind all of it. Nobody's hiding it on purpose. It's just invisible by design. A lease payment is loud. A retirement account is silent. And silence, you're starting to realize, has been losing the argument by default. Part 2, Killing the Debt. The statement has been sitting unread in your inbox for weeks. The subject line fading with age. You finally open it on a Sunday night, bowl of noodles going cold on the counter. Balance, $5,940. Interest rate, 24.9%. Minimum payment, $148. You know exactly how this balance was built. A security deposit you didn't have in cash, a dental emergency in the spring, a plane ticket home for a funeral you weren't going to miss no matter the cost. None of it felt reckless when it happened. It felt like living. Your upstairs neighbor, a guy named Theo who works overnight shifts, once told you he just pays the minimum and doesn't think about it. It's basically nothing, he said. So tonight, for once, you actually run the math Theo never did. At that rate, paying only the minimum, that balance takes more than 8 years to clear, and you'll pay more in interest than the original debt itself, just for the comfort of not thinking about it. That number stops feeling abstract. It starts feeling like a second rent payment you never agreed to sign for. You think about the $140 a month quietly compounding in your 401k. This card is the same machine running in reverse. Same daily compounding, except instead of building something, it's dismantling it one billing cycle at a time. You don't have the credit for a balance transfer card yet. So instead, you build a real number. $5,940 divided by 16 months comes out to $372 a month. Uncomfortable. That means canceling 2 streaming subscriptions, packing lunch instead of buying it, skipping a friend's bachelor weekend you were already dreading having to decline. But 16 months at that pace cost roughly $1,000 in interest instead of nearly $6,000. You write the number on a sticky note and put it on your laptop, not as motivation, just as a fact you don't want to lose again. You set the autopay for $372 starting Friday. Watching the confirmation load, you feel something closer to dread than relief because that's real money leaving a paycheck that was already stretched thin. Theo knocks on your door 2 nights later to borrow a phone charger, and you almost tell him what you found. You don't. Not yet. It feels too soon. Too much like lecturing someone who didn't ask. But you notice yourself doing the math automatically now, the way you used to check your phone out of habit. Every price tag turns into 2 numbers, what it costs today and what it costs if it rides on the card for a year. It's exhausting at first, then it just becomes how you see things. Part 3. The 6-month wall. 3 weeks into the new autopay, your car answers a question you hadn't asked yet. It stalls twice at red lights, then won't start at all outside the warehouse at 6 p.m. on a Tuesday. The tow truck driver, a woman named Priya who's done this job for 15 years, drops it at a shop 2 exits away. The diagnosis: a failing alternator and a starter that's not far behind it. $580, due before they will release the car. You have $410 in savings, the same $410 you had 3 weeks ago, because every spare dollar has been going toward the card. Sitting in the shop's waiting room, you do math you should have done a month earlier. You're short $170. The nearest source of that money is the same card you've been trying to shrink. This is the moment it all stops being theoretical. All that talk about compounding interest was true, but it lived on a screen you could close. This is a car that won't start and a shop that wants payment before closing. You put the difference on the card, and swiping it, you finally understand. Not from an article, but from the feeling in your chest. Why an emergency fund isn't a nice to have. It's a wall. It's supposed to stand between you and exactly this moment. And it wasn't finished yet. Your coworker Alina, who works 2 stations down, once mentioned she keeps 4 months of expenses in a boring high-yield savings account, untouched on purpose. You nodded politely and filed it away. Now, walking out of the shop, it doesn't sound boring anymore. It sounds like the difference between a rough week and a ruined year. Your monthly expenses run around $1,900. 6 months of that is $11,400, a number so far from your current $410 that it feels impossible. But you're not building all of it this week. You're building the first $100 of it this Friday, the same way the card payment became real by simply picking a number and a date. That night, you open a separate account and move $50 into it. Money you technically don't have room for, but move anyway. It isn't the wall yet. It's the first brick. You name the account something plain: buffer. Nothing clever, because you don't want it to feel like a reward you're saving up for. It's not for a vacation or a splurge. It's for the next Tuesday that goes sideways, whenever that turns out to be. You set a recurring transfer for $25 every payday, small enough that you barely notice it leaving. And you promise yourself you won't touch it unless the situation looks exactly like the one you just walked out of. A shop, a deadline, no other option in the room. Part 4. The earning engine. The question of what you're worth per hour doesn't wait long to resurface. Monday morning, your supervisor calls you in and tells you, almost apologetically, that this year's raise is 2.5%, same as last year. Your annual pay ticks up by less than $40 a month after taxes, less than what you just started sending toward the alternator fund. Sitting at your workstation afterward, something Alina said weeks ago comes back to you. She'd mentioned, almost offhand, that she does freelance data entry for a small logistics firm on weekends. The same skills she uses at work all day, just without a ceiling on them. It's not extra work, she'd said. It's the same work, just not capped by what my manager decides I'm worth. That distinction sits with you longer than the raise did. Your salary has a ceiling built in, decided somewhere in a budget meeting you'll never attend. But the actual skill you have, moving inventory efficiently, catching errors before they become problems, doesn't have that ceiling. It only has whatever limit you put on it yourself. That night, you build a profile on a freelance platform, list the systems you know cold, and forget about it for 4 days until a small regional distributor reaches out. 20 hours a month, remote, evenings, $19 an hour. It's not much, a few $100s every 2 weeks, done in the time you used to spend scrolling. But it's money with no ceiling attached. You also notice how much faster you move on the freelance work, because nobody's watching the clock, only the result. Your old laptop screen is too small and too slow for the software, so you buy a refurbished monitor for $160 after 2 days of hesitation. It's not a treat, it's a tool that makes the extra income sustainable. By month's end, between the raise and the freelance hours, you've added roughly $300 that never touched your regular paycheck at all. It doesn't feel like much, laid out on a spreadsheet next to your rent and your card payment. But it's the first money you've made in years that didn't come with a shift schedule attached to it. Nobody assigned it. Nobody can take it away in a budget meeting. You start noticing how differently that money sits in your chest compared to your regular paycheck. Less like relief, more like proof. Proof that the ceiling you thought was permanent was only ever attached to one specific job, not to you. Part 5. The asymmetric bet. 6 weeks later, the freelance connection turns into something bigger. A 4-person logistics startup built by a former warehouse manager named Dara offers you a full-time role. $46,000, a pay cut from your current salary, plus a small equity stake vesting over 4 years. You bring the offer to Alina at lunch, sliding your phone across the table like it might bite her. "That's less money," she says, which is exactly what's been keeping you up since Tuesday. Dara mentions, almost in passing, that her old boss took a similar leap years ago, and when that company was eventually acquired, he walked away with enough to pay off a house outright. Nobody knows if the startup becomes that story. That's the entire point of a bet like this. It isn't a guess dressed up as confidence, it's a decision where you can name your downside in advance. Here, the downside is roughly $6,000 a year in lost salary for up to 4 years if the equity never vests into anything real. That number you can survive. It's not Marcus's truck payment. It's a bruise, not a break. The upside has no ceiling because equity doesn't behave like a paycheck. Your raise this year was capped the day it was announced. This stake isn't capped by anything except how far the company grows. That night, you calculate something you've never bothered to calculate before. The number where your investments alone, growing without another dollar added, could eventually cover your expenses for good. At your current spending, that number sits somewhere in 6 figures. You're nowhere close. But for the first time, you can see a shape of a path where this bet, not another small raise, is what closes the distance in years instead of decades. None of your other obligations disappear if you take this job. The card payment, the emergency fund, the alternator repair. The bet doesn't erase the ground under your feet. It just changes what you're standing on it for. You send the acceptance email close to midnight, read it twice, and hit send before you can talk yourself back into the safer, more familiar ceiling. Not because you're certain, because you finally realized certainty was never actually on the table, even in the job you're leaving. The equity vests over 4 years, which means nothing changes tomorrow or next month or for a long while after that. What you've actually gained by hitting send is smaller than a payout and stranger than a promotion. It's exposure to a future that doesn't exist yet, in exchange for tying your name to something that might. You give your 2 weeks notice the next morning, and your supervisor barely reacts, already halfway through mentally filling your slot. It's not personal, it's just how replaceable the ceiling always made you. Part 6. Building the fortress. 5 months into the new job, you're riding with Dara back from a client meeting when her phone lights up on the dash. Her mother, 71 this year. She lets it ring out, then says quietly, "I still don't know where her paperwork is." You think about your own parents and realize you don't know either. That night, instead of the freelance dashboard, you're looking at term life insurance quotes for the first time in your life. Not because anything happened, but because for the first time, someone depends on you existing. A 20-year policy for a healthy non-smoker runs about $24 a month, less than the monitor you bought a few months back. You sit with that for a second. $24 a month is the cost of making sure a bad day doesn't turn into a second tragedy for the people who love you. You also look into a basic will. Under $200, one afternoon of decisions about who gets what and who speaks for you if you can't speak for yourself. You don't have much yet. No house, no acquisition payout. But you have a 401k, a small vesting equity stake, and a car that's finally running clean. Someone should know what happens to all of it. You call your dad that Sunday, circling the subject twice before finally asking directly where his paperwork is. He goes quiet, then tells you it's in a drawer in the hall closet. And something in his voice sounds relieved that you asked before he had to bring it up first. You hang up and sit at your kitchen table for a while. The new monitor dark, the street outside doing whatever it does on a Sunday night. None of this felt like winning. It felt more like maintenance. The unglamorous kind nobody posts about. The kind that only matters on the one day you hope never comes. But maintenance is what keeps a fortress standing long after it's finished being built. And somewhere between the alternator, the equity, and a drawer in your father's hall closet, you've quietly stopped being the version of you who once envied a truck payment in a parking lot. Part 7. When you stop watching the number. You still check the account most mornings, but you're not bracing for bad news anymore. The dread used to arrive before the app even finished loading. Now it's just routine, the way someone checks the weather before a drive, the car still makes a small noise on cold mornings, the equity still hasn't vested, next month will still ask something of you that this one didn't finish paying off. But you're no longer doing the math just to survive it. You're doing it because you finally know exactly what you're protecting, and which numbers, out of all of them, were actually worth carrying all along. Some evenings, you catch yourself glancing at the buffer account before you even open your main balance just to confirm it's still there, still boring, still doing nothing dramatic. There's a version of you from a year ago who would have found that habit strange, maybe even a little sad. Checking a number that never moves much instead of one that swings with every paycheck. But you've come to understand that boring is the entire point. Boring is what a wall is supposed to look like from the outside. It's only exciting the one day it actually has to hold. You still think about Marcus's truck sometimes, and every other number you use to measure yourself against without meaning to. None of that disappears completely, but it's quieter now, further back, the way a song fades once you've stopped needing it to prove anything. What's louder is the ledger nobody sees, the account that grows on its own, the debt finally shrinking instead of compounding against you, the will in a drawer, the small, unglamorous math that was never about winning, only about still being standing, on your own terms, whenever the day finally comes that tests it.